All right, everyone, I'm here with Dr. Rob from Hydrolyze, and he is the chief scientist and he formulates products with Hydrolyze. So this is really cool. It's definitely a treat. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Rob. We appreciate it.
No, this is an absolute treat for me. I love your store, and you guys, you have the best education.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And I want to let him tell you guys his background, his education background, and some things that you've worked on, Dr. Rob.
Wow. How much time do we have? My passion for nutrition actually began in high school. I started learning everything I could about nutrition, as an athlete, training in the gym. I went to the University of Pittsburgh, got my undergraduate degree from the University of Pittsburgh. I am a registered dietitian. There's not too many boy RDs out there, but we're some of them. And my master's from Florida State University, go Noles, and my PhD from the Ohio State University, go Bucks.
That's where Gabby goes. That's why she's excited.
9 years, and left, and I worked in industry, and also moonlighted as a research scientist at universities. But I worked for GNC, I've worked for Genesis Today, Melaleuca. And I've been with Hydrolyze now for almost 8 years, serving as Chief Science Officer and doing all things. And I'm really proud of everything that we do, at Hydrolyze, because we spend a lot of money and put a lot of effort into the science of our products. We've done about 40 research studies on our ingredients, on training, on our products, to make sure that we fully understand training and we fully understand the nutrients that we use and how our products work, and so that we can substantiate our claims. We can stand by everything that we say when we talk about our products. But that's it. Part of my job is to go around the world, speak about sport nutrition. So I've got the greatest job on the planet.
That's phenomenal. I agree with you. I think it's pretty awesome. So can you speak a little bit about, you guys spend a lot of money on research, and there's a lot of research studies that are done, not only with supplementation, how it interacts on the body, but also with training.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the specific manufacturing processes that might set Hydrolyze apart from, say, some of the cheaper brands, I guess, that are out there?
Well, I'll speak to, so when you speak to manufacturing, a lot of times you speak to, control and quality. I mean, you really know what you're doing when you manufacture products. We spend a lot on the quality side of our business. In fact, one of our 3 pillars is verified quality. All of our products are produced in NSF, GMP sports certified facilities, so that there's no banned substances in those facilities. We work tirelessly with the trade associations in trying to ensure that the sport nutrition industry is the most virtuous industry, that it's as straightforward to the consumer, it doesn't overmarket, and that there's good sound principles in how products are made and how they're marketed, where the ingredients come from, and so forth. So we vet all of our ingredients. We have very stringent, specifications. We have very tough testing programs. All of our products will adhere to their label claims, and within the full agreement of what the FDA, says. We put right on our packages what we call our protein ethics. And our protein ethics state that if a protein product says 25 grams of protein, it will always test out at 25 grams or higher. Not a roundup, not 20%, plus or minus. Okay, it's very clear with the FDA rules that if you call it out as, this product contains X number of grams of protein, you have to at least meet that level. And that's what we do. We want to be as open, as transparent to the consumer, and we want them to fully get on board and believe in the quality of our products. And then we put a lot in to making our products taste great. And we have a fully functional R&D laboratory with some of the best scientists that work tirelessly on flavors, on mixability, and so forth, to make sure that our products not only they just taste great, and then we're 100% buttoned up on the quality side.
I think it seems like Dymatize is at the forefront of this. With over the last 8 years that you've been with Dymatize, what are some of the big industry trends that you've seen that are changing? It seems like a lot of brands are trying to go for what they consider more of a transparent view to the consumer, and hardly anyone uses proprietary blends anymore. Have you noticed that trend over the 8 years you've been with Dymatize, that companies are going more toward educating the consumer and actually being more transparent?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely crucial today. I think the consumer is more knowledgeable. I think there's more information, and there's more good education, from folks like you guys. You're just asking the right questions. You're communicating the right information because you do it every day. When you interact with your customers, you want to be able to give them 100% of the information that they seek. The only way that you can do that is being 100% sure of what's in a product, and making sure, being comfortable that the information that's being provided on the nutrition facts or the supplement facts is factual. And, so gone pretty much are the days of proprietary blends where ingredients are blended together and you really don't know how much of any specific blend is there. The more open label design is much more apparent today, where you call out specifically how much of each nutrient you will have in either a dietary supplement, and I'm even seeing more of it in proteins as well, where they'll call out if there's a blend of proteins, what the ratio is in the blend.
So one of the best-selling products we have really in this entire store right now is All9, the essential amino acid product, obviously from Dymatize. Can you talk a little bit about the uses of All9, and also what's the ratio of EAAs that's used in All9, and is there a specific reasoning behind that ratio?
Well, so essential amino acids, we know that they're essential because you can't make them in your body, or you can't make them in adequate quantities. And there's a lot that we don't know about, what those levels are for people who train hard. So we're making a little bit of leaps of faith based on other information. So we have to provide them in our diet, and then the availability of those amino acids within the muscle will be primary factors in determining how much actual protein you can make. So that's why the EAAs are so important. So in formulating a good EAA product, there's some real basic questions that you have to ask, and that is, how much of the different essential amino acids do you really want to have? And so we went down the path because we really understand whey protein, that we wanted to build this product on a whey protein essential amino acid platform. So in that product, we're getting the essential amino acid composition of around 5.6, 5.7 grams of essential amino acids from whey protein. It's about half of a serving of ISO 100. So that's the base for the essential amino acid platform. Then we added some additional branched chain amino acids on top of that, so that we could achieve a 7.2 grams of branched chain amino acids per serving. And the primary reason that we wanted to really bolster the branched chain amino acids is, when you think about muscle protein manufacturing, there's really a couple of key components, or a couple of key phases, or key things to consider. Number one is, sort of activating and, driving, the drive, what turns it on, what cranks it up, the ability, or what I would like to call the capacity or the potential to build protein. And, the biggest driver of that is leucine. The other branched chain amino acids may play a synergistic or supporting role, and then the other essential amino acids may support as well. So they're all important, but leucine's really the king. We've talked about the leucine trigger, or getting leucine up to levels somewhere between 2 to 3.5 grams per meal, especially if somebody's coming from sort of an unfed state, to get the levels up in the blood, which then translates into the movement into the muscle to really activate and really crank up the signaling pathways that tell the muscle, start making as much protein as you can based upon the available amino acids. And that's the second part, how much of the available amino acids are there, and more importantly, how much the essential amino acids are there, because the more that you have, the greater the potential to meet and optimize, whatever that stimulus is. So, imagine building a brick wall, and your brick wall requires so many specific colored bricks. You'll stop when you run out of a specific colored brick. If you're looking at a blueprint, it says, you need 5 red bricks, and you do 4, and then you put the 5th one in there, and when you get to the instructions, it says insert the 6th one. You can't go any further. And that's really the beauty of like essential amino acid supplementation, is that it can help ensure that you have an ample supply of the dietary essential amino acids, so that muscle protein manufacturing, the actin and the myosin, the troponins and the tropomyosins, and so all that beautiful contracted proteins can be manufactured to their full ability based on the needs and demands of the muscle cell.
That's interesting. So it sounds like, I've tried this too, and it tastes phenomenal. I'm obsessed with some of the tastes that you guys are coming out with here recently. So that's definitely an added bonus as well. But when would be the best time to take all 9? What's the timing of it, and what demographic? All demographics obviously can benefit, but maybe a couple demographics that benefit the most out of a product like this.
Well, I think really you can look at it any time, because what you're really doing is you're taking the most important part of protein and delivering it in a supplement form. So then you step back and ask the question, well, when should I take protein? So really the best time to, where you would get the biggest bang for your buck might be those times during the day where your protein intake isn't high. So you can use this, and I know a lot of people now that are actually layering it on top of either a protein shake, so they're taking a single serving of protein, which may drive 25 grams of a protein, and then they're adding the essential amino acids on top of it, so they're getting the equivalent. They're getting the EAA equivalent of 35 to 40 grams of protein. So you may layer it on top of existing protein intake. I know that a lot of people are using it now when their food intake is restricted, or either strategically, and I know a lot of people do fasted cardio, or they'll do intermittent feeding, and they don't want to consume whole macronutrient containing foods. So they may supplement the EAAs during that time, because it will put them in a better position with regard to muscle protein turnover to have the essential amino acids versus not having any protein at all.
That makes sense.
Yeah. The last point I do want to make too is that there's a lot of really good data and a lot of good support for supplementing essential amino acids immediately before, during, and immediately after a workout for different reasons. And here are the reasons. Number one is that during different types of exercise, having availability of branched chain amino acids and maybe secondarily the other essential amino acids can help reduce muscle protein breakdown during the training. Some of the branched chain amino acids may be utilized as a fuel source during the training as well, especially during more protracted exercise efforts, cycling and running and so forth. And then lastly, there's a lot of really good support for branched chain amino acids, which would be a component of your essential amino acids in helping muscle recover from a soreness standpoint, which can be really important for some people, especially people who are just getting going when the muscle isn't as efficient in its work and they're more prone to soreness. So, I think that you can look at it any time during the day. Choose those times during the day where your protein intake may be, moderate, and you may want support of it, and in and around your workout session as well, to maybe, help minimize the breakdown during, and then put you in a really good position once the workout is over, when muscle protein synthesis opportunity or potential really amplifies after the workout is over. So you've already sort of primed the muscle with an increased pool of the essential amino acids.
Something that doesn't has not made a lot of sense to me recently that I see a lot of online is comparing BCAAs with EAAs, and obviously BCAAs being 3 of the 9 EAAs. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me personally. Can you speak a little bit to, you know, what people might be trying to get at there, looking at BCAAs versus EAAs, and why there is some comparison with the two, and why people are trying to draw a line between the two?
Well, I think the biggest, you know, the biggest point of conversation is that if you're trying to drive the building of new protein, which is the true definition of, you know, anabolic or anabolism, it isn't just to create a differential between how much, you know, synthesis and breakdown, but it's actually to create incremental, you know, or higher levels of protein production, you know, to build. So the idea is that if you're only supplementing branched-chain amino acids and you're unfed, and this is an interesting point that I think we all need to consider, is that when we talk about this, we're talking about being unnourished, unfed, not consuming anything, any protein or food for several hours prior. So these are unique, sometimes laboratory experimental scenarios that we then try to transition out into the real world. But if you do go back and you say, okay, in an unfed state, and you're trying to use the branched-chain amino acids to build new muscle, you're not going to be very successful because you don't have the other 6 essential amino acids that you pointed out. You're missing them. Your supplement is limited in its amino acid delivery because it doesn't have the other 6 building blocks, the essential building blocks. So, you know, in that comparison, in an unfed state or in a low protein intake, you know, that the essential amino acids can be better than the branched-chain amino acids in building new protein because they contain the other 6 amino acids. Now, I think there's another interesting point that's in there as well, and that is sometimes when we put together essential amino acid formulations and we say, oh, it's 3 grams of essential amino acids, that's 3 grams made up of 9, sometimes 10 of the essentials and the semi-essentials. And when you only have 3 grams to work with, you may not be hitting high enough levels of perhaps some of the more important essential amino acids, such as leucine and the branch chains. So, you know, not only, you know, do you have to consider how much of the essential amino acids are being delivered in your supplement, you also have to figure out, you know, what's your nutrition state, what are you trying to accomplish with it, and then also, if you're supplementing with it, are you getting high enough levels in your supplement to really make a difference?
Yeah, that's interesting. So really ratios have to be determined before any kind of thought process would take place. They were looking at the two, and I think you made a good point too of looking at kind of lab situations and trying to apply them to real life. That doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Yeah, that cleared it up quite a bit for me. With tryptophan being in the product, and obviously one of the 9, will it limit valaine's endurance best?
So I would say no, because the levels aren't very high.
Okay.
So usually, you know, when you look at gram levels of essential amino acids, you're going all the way back and pretty much, you know, outside of the branch chains, which usually are the highest contributor, you know, you're talking, you know, hundreds of milligrams of the other, you know, the other amino acids. Tryptophan usually in a lot of these supplements is in low milligram amounts. So it's a very large amino acid. It plays a very specific role in the 3-dimensional nature of, you know, super cool, you know, proteins in muscle, but it's not there in, you know, in extremely high ratio amounts within a lot of supplements or within the muscle tissue itself.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, so I mean, I think that was a really good breakdown of all 9, and I want to move on and talk a little bit about ISO 100 now. And obviously with some of all 9 being comprised of ISO 100, I think it's a good segue. And again, ISO 100 is another product I really like the flavoring on. I think you guys have done a great job with the flavoring on it. Can you speak to what exactly it means to be a hydrolyzed whey isolate?
Well, the hydrolyzed process, so, you know, whey comes from milk, and so it's basically intact proteins. Whey is a family of different types of proteins, and they're intact. They're in their 3-dimensional functional form. And there are very long chains of amino acids linked together by peptide bonds. So if you hydrolyze a protein, you apply a little bit of heat, a little bit of energy to sort of allow the protein molecule to open up, and then you apply enzymes, which will go in there and just sort of make very strategic little cuts between the amino acids. So you end up with a protein that might have been hundreds or thousands of amino acids linked together, and now you've got sort of a pile of shorter chains of amino acids linked together, what we would refer to as peptides and polypeptides. So hydrolysis is the pre-digestion or the pre-breakdown of bigger proteins into smaller protein types like peptides and polypeptides. Now, we've been doing that for decades and using it in different foods for functional purposes. You find it in infant formula as well, especially for infants that struggle in properly digesting some of the complex proteins in whey as well as milk in general. It may be pre-hydrolyzed. And then hydrolysis for sport nutrition may also help some athletes with some GI discomfort as well. It may make sure and ensure that the absorption rate is as fast as possible. For a lot of us, it's really important because one of the great benefits of whey protein and whey isolate, because it's almost all protein, is that it's going to clear the stomach quickly. It does well in the acidity of the stomach. It stays liquefied in the acidity of the stomach, and it allows it to move from the stomach into the small intestine very quickly. And we know that because the amino acid levels go up in the blood really faster. Within the first 30 to 60 minutes, you've already almost reached your peak for amino acid levels in the blood. It's very fast. That means it clears the stomach fast. So if you have to go out onto the field, if you're going to do deep squats, if you're going to invert and do leg presses, it's awesome not to have that content in your stomach where you can collapse down and it can go up, and who knows. But so that's one of the great benefits of like whey protein, and then pre-hydrolyzing it certainly ensures that super fast digestion and absorption, as well as may help some people with a little bit of the discomfort that they may experience with milk-based proteins and whey protein in general.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was going to make that next, is being a hydrolyzed whey isolate, obviously it's going to be easy on the stomach. Even for someone maybe with some type of mild lactose intolerance, they're probably still okay with a product like this.
Yeah, because for a product like ISO 100 using whey protein isolate, our lactose level in that product is typically less than half a gram. So it's very low. Most people that have true lactose intolerance, you're up into the higher single digits of grams of lactose, 6, 7, 8, 9 grams, where a little bit of a dairy product may be okay, but once you have 6 ounces of milk or some ice cream or whatever, and you push that lactose level up high enough, that's when you really experience the full symptomology of a lactose intolerance.
Yeah, and that's one of the options, the first options we go to in the store when somebody comes in and they have had issues in the past with, discomfort with proteins and, not breaking down proteins well, or even someone that just says, outright that they have a little bit of lactose intolerance. That's one of the first options we go to, so that's good to know. Let's move on and talk about the pre-workout, and I was kind of, between you and I, when I saw Ryan for the first time with the new pre-workout, it surprised me a little because it's so fully dosed. And yes. That's not something, correct me if I'm wrong, that's not something Dymatize had done in the past with pre-workouts, is to have such a fully dosed, large amount of ingredients in one scoop. So that kind of threw me off, and it looks great. I mean, it's a good formula. Can you speak to the vasodilation side of the product with so much citrulline and the specific type of arginine as well that's in the product?
Yeah, so, and you're absolutely right. I mean, this is a full formulated pre-workout. And, the reason that we did it that way was, we know that great results come from great workouts. If you don't have a great workout, if you don't feel it, if you don't push your volume, and if you don't just really attack it, then you're not going to get great results. You can't overnourish a bad workout and get great results. So exercise creates a stimulus. nutrition enables and optimizes the change. It's a partnership. One can't overcompensate for the other. So we wanted to formulate this product so it attacked several different important factors when it comes to working out. You want to feel it. So we made sure it was well caffeinated, and then we also have a full efficacious level of T-crin when it's combined with caffeine. So 125 milligrams of T-crin combined with 300 milligrams of caffeine. So that combination is there. From a circulation standpoint, we have several ingredients that address circulation. So nitrosogene is a special arginine complex that seems to, what we see is that it's a lot more stable than just arginine by itself, coming from an arginine compound. And we know that arginine, is vulnerable, whether it's in the blood or the lining of the digestive tract. There are arginases that will break it down. And, I guess the body doesn't want to have a lot of free arginine, but so if we're trying to get the benefit from a vasodilation or a circulation support from arginine by itself, we were seeing that it took high gram levels in order to get there, and it wasn't always a predictable outcome. So the special formulation, the complex of the arginine with the inositol, and it just stabilizes it so that it can be transformed into nitric oxide and vasodilate and help with strength better and more predictably at a much lower level. So the research that has been done is showing 1.5 grams as a efficacious level. So that's why we targeted that. Citrulline malate is a really interesting. I love the non-proteogenic amino acids. The amino acids that are part of our diet and have functional roles in our body, but they're not used as building blocks for protein. I think they're cool. So you've got beta-alanine, you've got GABA, you've got citrulline, these are cool. Maybe carnitine, even though it's not a true amino acid, you can throw that in there as well. They're not used to build protein. So citrulline is really interesting because it can be converted to arginine, and then arginine can be converted to nitric oxide. And the complex of citrulline malate is primarily the delivery form of citrulline. And I think where the lower threshold for potential citrulline efficacy for men is probably somewhere around 4 grams. And so that's the level that was used in some of the earlier studies. That's a level that is found in some of the newer studies that are showing that if you use citrulline malate before a training session, you may be able to get a couple of extra reps during sets. So and that's big. When you look at the data and you look at an experimental design and somebody does leg press or somebody does bench press, and on the 3rd set and the 4th set they get 1 more rep, and you go, oh, well, that's just 1 more rep. But that when we're building muscle, it's about workload. Workload over time, and more workload can lead to better results over time. So getting that extra volume in a workout and then more volume over time in serial workouts will make all the difference in the gains or the maintains that you experience with that. So somewhere around 4 grams seems to be in and around the a really good level. It could be a little bit less, but this is what we know from the research right now. But the other thing that's really important, I think, for people to dig into, and it's not always available, is citrulline malate can come in a 1-to-1 ratio, or it can be a 2-to-1 ratio of citrulline to malate. So if it's got 6 grams of citrulline malate, then it's really important to know whether it's a 1-to-1 or a 2-to-1, because the 1-to-1 may be just barely dosed or slightly underdosed in citrulline. So, I think all brands should be calling that out, or at least communicating on their web pages or something that they use, or how much actual citrulline is in the product. I think that the malate doesn't do a whole heck of a lot other than provide a unique delivery compound, but I think when it gets into the stomach, it freely dissociates, and they're separate and they go about their separate business. And I don't think that a couple of grams of malate, even though it's a TCA intermediate, some people say it's providing muscle energy, I just don't think that that's as valuable as what the citrulline may provide with regard to conversion to arginine and then nitric oxide. And I think what's really interesting about some of these circulation support vehicles is that, and we've seen this with pomegranate extract, and it's maybe the case with citrulline as well, is that exercise by itself is one of the most potent vasodilators when it comes to blood flow supporting active working muscle tissue, muscle cells. So the blood flow is already maximal during, the acute bout of exercise, the contraction of the muscle and so forth. Then in between, when the muscle is resetting and resting and recovering and so forth, this is where I think that the circulation support really comes into play, in that it helps the blood vessel stay as open as possible longer during the recovery period in between bouts. So that if somebody does 6 sets on the bench or leg press or whatever, it may allow better circulation and better reset and better recovery of the muscle in between those subsequent bouts. And we know that performance goes down as we do more sets. We've equated that to reductions in glycogen content and so forth, but also there may be other factors involved, like the muscle isn't recovering 100%. So if it recovers 90% each time, then by the time you get to that 5th and 6th set, that's also hurting your performance as well. So I think that maybe keeping the blood flow in the vessel patent, just more dilated, allowing more blood flow perhaps during that rest period in between sets, that may help the muscle sort of recover and get one extra rep longer. And I consider that to be rep sparing, not necessarily enhancing the number of reps, because you're not going to do more than you did on the first or the second set. But when you get to that 4th and 5th one, where instead of getting 8 or 9, you're getting like 4 to 6, maybe now you can get 5 or 7. And so what you're doing is you're sparing it, and you're holding on to that extra rep, and that's going to add to your workload.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept, and that definitely would make a difference, especially over time. I want to backtrack just a bit, and I want to touch on the nitrosogene. You said it's not as vulnerable to arginase being broken down. Now, would you be able to make some sort of claim of, probably being a better endurance ingredient than nitrosogene as opposed to L-arginine, because of the arginase not necessarily having as much of a role in maybe capping vasodilation properties at that point?
Yeah, I mean, that's the work that's been done, in research, that, it shows that it's more stable. It's a longer enduring delivery form of arginine. So it makes it a little bit more, available longer. And, there's still a lot that we have to learn about it, but and to do so at a much lower level of arginine, I think is really the key, because, even if it took 9 grams of arginine to get a good vasodilation, good, nitric oxide response, and we can really measure that accurately, that would, a lot of people would just go, hey, that's great, I'm going to go right at that 9 grams. But a 9-gram amino acid load, can be a lot on the gut and so forth. And we see this with other higher gram, intake levels, that you can reach a point where, it's not great in the stomach sometimes.
Yeah, and so supplementing with nitrosogene, does that have a same or similar effect to, let's say we use just L-arginine and then we add norvaline to the ingredient profile to maybe cap, to erase some of that arginase breakdown? Is it a similar effect, or is there a difference there? Is one better than the other? Maybe supplementing nitrosogene by itself versus having L-arginine and norvaline together?
And so you challenged me with that, because I skimmed over a research study that was brought forth, I think it was about 6 months ago. And if I remember correctly, they were reporting that in nitrosogene, in the test method that they used, and I can't remember if it was extracted in vitro cell culture, or if it was actually within a sample of blood or whatever. But I think what they were suggesting is that the nitrosogene might actually reduce the aggressiveness or the action of the arginase itself by, just reducing its activity. I'd have to go back and look at that. So I'd say Wildman's on thin ice here. If I'm to hang my hat on that one, I'm not hanging my hat on that one, but I think that might have been the outcome that was reported in one study. But I'd have to dig that one up and then get back to you on that.
For my own knowledge as well, I think it's interesting that you touched on the hypothetical situation of having 9 grams of arginine. Not that somebody would do that necessarily, but with 6 grams of citrulline, I feel like, me personally, when I take that dosage, I like that dosage and I like being around, somewhere in there. But some of these companies, I actually saw a company, obviously not going to call anybody out, but I saw a company using 10 grams of citrulline per scoop in their pre-workout. Do you feel like there's a limit on how much citrulline you should be consuming before exercise? Obviously it's a beneficial ingredient, but do you feel like there's a limit to how much you should be putting in your body before you exercise?
Well, I think the real question is, at what point do you sort of top out on the benefit that you're hoping to achieve?
Right.
So, there's a lot that we don't know about upper limits as far as, but maybe, I can't say that for sure because most of the work has sort of been in that moderate gram level of citrulline in the form of citrulline malate. There have been studies with just L-citrulline as well at lower levels. But I don't know if I've really seen anybody dig deep and look at 10 grams of citrulline by itself and so forth. But these are great research questions. That A, does it provide additional benefit? B, is it potentially ergolytic at some point, disrupting something? Who knows? But I don't know. I guess time will tell, and when we do the research, we can figure that out a little bit better, or whether there's a better dosing model on how much fat-free mass is engaged in the exercise, how much muscle mass there is. There's so many things that we don't know that right now we just make recommendations based on gram level thresholds that were used in research studies that we assume were high enough to be beneficial for most of the individuals that were in the study.
The last question I have is also kind of a question I just thought of as you were going, and I'm personally curious. You had kind of alluded to vasodilation maybe being something that's hard to measure, maybe specifically through supplementation. How exactly do you guys, how does one go about measuring that? And is it something that is accurate? Because it seemed like you alluded to it not being so accurate or hard to measure.
Yeah, so you have to image it primarily. So if you think about how we can determine the health of a fetus or the sex of a fetus, we'll image it with sonography most of the time. If we want to look at blood vessels and how open they are, we can image them as well by moving sound into the tissue and have it reflect back and measure it with a probe. It'll give you an image of what that looks like, and then we can freeze frame it and measure like the difference between the size or of a blood vessel to see if it's greater or if it's less. Mm-hmm. And so there's that way of sort of assessing what they would call like flow-mediated vasodilation. It's just one measure. There are other forms of sonography that you can use as well that will actually capture the volume of the movement. But these are some of the simpler ways. What I was referring to more so was the actual measurement of nitric oxide itself as it's produced, because it's almost a ghost. Like you think you measured it and then it's gone. So if you're trying to directly measure nitric oxide versus maybe measuring an indirect measure in saliva, if you're trying to actually measure it within the tissue that's potentially being affected, it's a very difficult measurement to to actually measure true nitric oxide. Usually you're looking at a metabolite, or you're looking at an indirect measure in saliva as your sort of estimator backwards to what's happening at the tissue level.
That's very interesting. Citrulline, when we were talking about citrulline malate, the difference in bonded versus blended, and does it really make that much of a difference in general?
Well, I don't know if any of it's bonded. So I think with citrulline malate as an ingredient, you've got citrulline, L-citrulline, and malate, which comes from malic acid, and they're just being blended up together. It's what we would consider to be an admixture. It's not really it's not a covalent bond. They're just together, and then that's why if it's in the stomach, they can freely dissociate that way.
Okay.
So they're not bonded or held together. By sharing electrons for those chemistry, and biology geeks out there, but they're just kind of holding on to each other loosely because they're blended together, and there's some light sort of attraction points on citrulline and malate that kind of help them kind of stay together a little bit.
So with BCAAs compared to EAAs taken intra-workout, and obviously wanting to utilize a benefit of muscle-sparing activity from the BCAA content, do you believe there would be a difference between, let's say, a 5 to 6 gram dose out of the 10 being BCAA to the other 6 EAA versus the 7.2 BCAA out of 10 that all 9 has? Would 7.2 compared to 5, let's say, promote more muscle-sparing activity during exercise and utilize non-lean tissue as energy as opposed to the smaller dose?
That's a great question, and we haven't directly studied that. The 7.2 grams of the branched-chain amino acids, certainly gets you up into a higher level of leucine, gets you up into what some have considered to be that leucine trigger range, that 2 to 3.5. So this is 3.6. A lot of the work that's done with muscle recovery and soreness is at levels of BCAAs that are 6 grams or higher. So that certainly supports there. We have to assume that some of the branched chain amino acids may be used for energy. And then some of the work that's been done with BCAAs, I believe they use levels like 77 milligrams per kilogram body weight, which is around 5.6, maybe 6 grams of BCAAs if my math works real fast. Sometimes it doesn't. But I think we could go 5 grams and be less sure of providing a really strong level of branched chain amino acids. And we went a little bit higher, because we feel that the data range for recovery, the data range perhaps for potential benefit in reducing muscle protein breakdown may be better served with a higher level of branched chain amino acids.
Perfect. All right, well, that was Dr. Rob from Diametize. Thank you so much for joining us. That was phenomenal. I had a lot of fun with this. So I hope you guys enjoyed this educational piece. And again, thank you so much. Maybe we'll do another one in the future because this was a blast.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for educating our customers. That's what we're all about. And to have someone on like you is a treat. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a great time. Appreciate it.